My name is Joel. I'm from Illinois. I've never really been anywhere else. We've traveled in vacation, different places, but I was born and raised in Illinois. And if you know anything about Illinois, you probably either picture cornfields or you picture the city of Chicago. And you'd be right. That's all there is in Illinois, to be perfectly honest. We come back, actually my wife and I both grew up by Chicago, and so we're city people, but we've been living literally in the middle of a cornfield for the last 12 years, 13 years of our lives. My church was literally in the middle of a cornfield. It was just interesting every day to get up and drive through the cornfields to get to our church. And now we're here in Florida, which has just been incredible. It stopped raining several days ago, which was good for us. We went to the beach. It's just been an overwhelmingly incredible thing. But what I've told my wife is this, is the only place that I've really felt comfortable is here, in this place. And I hope that you have felt that welcoming spirit here. You know, I figured out really quickly that the same questions that people ask in Illinois are the same questions that they've been asking in Florida. And quite literally, the same questions that they ask all over the world. It's the series we've been going through, these statements that have just been right to the heart and trying to help us to deal with these accusations that the world is throwing our way. That is happening all over the place because the church is getting asked question upon question upon question. And we need to be ready to answer those questions, both with our words and with our lives as we get into our topic today. And the one today is pretty difficult. God, I have a friend who believes that the church is full of hypocrites. Is our church full of hypocrites? Sometimes you get an answer that you're not fully expecting when you ask questions, don't you? My wife and I, we've been married for 10 years, celebrated this past summer. We were super excited about that. But in the midst of our dating, we came down here to a conference. I was in youth ministry. We came down to a conference in Orlando. We came down with two married couples, and then her and I were dating. And so we had planned this all out. This is going to be great. So we go to the conference for the first several days. Then we take a day and go to Disney World, because that's what you do when you come visit Orlando. We go to the Magic Kingdom, and I've got it all plotted out. I brought the ring with me, right? And I've got it in my pocket, and we're walking around the Magic Kingdom. We go to the teacups, but I don't ride those because I get sick on them. I get sick watching the teacups. So it's storming like crazy. I'm in torrential downpour, and everybody else in our group has gotten ponchos, and she's like yelling at me to get a poncho so I don't get soaking wet, and I know that that's going to ruin the pictures later if I'm in a poncho, so I'm not getting a poncho. She can't understand that at all. So I'm standing in the middle of a store, and they're riding the Dumbo ride in the pouring down rain, and I'm like, this is just crazy. I hope that this lets up, right? They get off Dumbo, and the rain finally subsides, and so we go over to the spot, right? Right in front of Cinderella's castle. And we have the other couples go up and take their photo op, that's great. And then Christy and I, we go up, and we pose a couple of, oh, hey, we're smiling. We're like, oh, the castle. And I go, are you done? And she's like, yeah, I think we're good. So she starts to walk away, and I go, well, I'm not yet. And I got down on one knee, right? The crowd starts gathering around, I'm like, this is awesome. I'm crying. I go, will you marry me? And I hold up the ring. And she says the two words that you're just absolutely wanting to hear at that point, right? Shut up. I had shocked her completely. She started running away. If I didn't have her hand, she would have been gone, right? I just caught her so off guard, she just didn't know what to say. And so, shut up came out. And I was like, what? Was that a yes? I don't know what happened here. It was a yes, which was awesome. And then we went and rode Pirates of the Caribbean. So that was, it was great, Yeah. Thank you. Lots of brownie points with that one. So, but I wasn't expecting that answer from her, right? That wasn't how it went in my mind. I had planned it all out for quite a while, and that was not the response I was looking for. Sometimes we ask questions and we get completely blindsided by the answers. I think today when we ask this question of is the church really full of hypocrites? When your friend decides to reject the church that he or she thinks that all the Christians in the church are hypocrites, the problem is that sometimes, a lot of the times, they're more right than wrong. Unfortunately, if we were to dig deep into our lives and see how we lived and the things that we said, these people that are accusing us of being hypocrites, they're probably right a lot of the time. And that's what makes it so hard for me to get up and preach to you guys, because I have had problems with hypocrisy before. Not that I've walked away from my faith, but sometimes what I'm preaching and what I'm doing is not the same. And God smacks me on the back of the head and says, wake up. You've got to be my voice. And so it's hard for me to get up and preach against hypocrisy when at the same time I've struggled with that in the past. And if we were honest, I think that probably some of you in here have struggled with that in the past. Maybe even at this moment, you've got some hypocrisy going on in your life. And there will be times in the future when you struggle with this idea of hypocrisy. And what you've said and what you've done don't match up. You see, I think one of the problems with us agreeing with this statement and grabbing hold of it is that we don't like that word hypocrite. Literally, we would say all Christians are sinners. The church is full of sinners, and you and I would be the first ones to step up and go, yes, that's me. I am a sinner, and I am in this church because God's grace is sufficient for me and sufficient for my sins, and now I've come to worship Him and accept the salvation that He's given to me. I am a sinner saved by grace. But when we throw hypocrite in there, it just kind of makes us feel crunchy, doesn't it? It really does. Hear this, all hypocrites are sinners, but not all sinners fall under the auspice of hypocrisy. And so hypocrites are sinning, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody that sins has become a hypocrite. I want to define this for you so we know what we're talking about. A hypocrite is someone who participates in the things that he or she preaches against. Okay, look at that again. A hypocrite is someone who participates in the things that he or she preaches against. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're preaching from a pulpit, but you're preaching from your lives. And so there's a definitive element of lying with our lives to the people around us. Participating in things that we have spoken directly against. I don't know if you've ever done this. As a new dad, this drives me crazy. And as I was preparing for this, it really struck me, right? I've done this many, many times. Stop yelling! My kids are like, what? You know? They just don't comprehend that. But don't we do that all the time with our children? Have you ever smacked their hand and said, we do not hit? Apparently that's happened in here before. We do not use those words, but yet you hear yourself saying them the next time around. We do not watch that show, but when they go to bed, you turn on whatever you want to. Isn't it going to be the same way when we are trying to witness the gospel of Jesus Christ to this world? If we are saying one thing and doing another? This is what we're talking about with hypocrisy. R.C. Sproul, a renowned theologian, says, outside observers of the church see people who profess to be Christians and observe that they sin. Since they see sin in the lives of Christians, they rush to the judgment that therefore these people are absolutely hypocrites. Dave Kinnaman, who wrote the book Unchristian, John has mentioned that in this series before. He says, our lives are a poor advertisement for the standards of Christianity. The truth is, we have invited the hypocrite image. So what are the things in your life that you are adamantly preaching against, but then continually partaking in? What are the things that you are not doing that you say that you are? See, the problem is so many of high-profile Christians, people that are on stages, get found out to be living different lives. I don't know if you remember the name Ted Haggard or not. In 2006, he was a preacher of a church of over 14,000 people. He was big into a leadership academy. He was teaching and training young people in leadership. And one of the things that he had preached against was the homosexual lifestyle, but then it was found out that he was participating in one. And the world looks at the church and says, hypocrite. Because his lifestyle was lying. There's another guy named Michael Guglielmucci. I don't know, crazy name, right? He's a pastor in Australia. Worked with the church Hillsong. I don't know if you've heard that. They produce a lot of our incredible worship music. And he came down with cancer. It was a difficult cancer. And he decided to write this song called Healer. Just a beautiful, beautiful song. I'm watching the video as it first came out, and I'm sobbing in my office. Just this idea that God would come in and be able to heal us from all of our pains. Even if physically we are not healed, we are spiritually healed. Just a beautiful, beautiful song. And it has him with their band, just a moment. Everybody's worshiping. He's got oxygen tank. He's got an oxygen mask on while he's singing this song, right? Come to find out, he never had cancer. His church didn't know. His leadership didn't know. His wife and family didn't know. But he used this as a platform. And the world points and says, hypocrite. What are the things in our lives that we are lying about to this world? What are the things that we are participating in but preaching against? Because only when we identify those things is when the world is going to start to stop and say, you know what, I see what's going on. They're not hypocrites, they're just sinners. But what they're professing is that they're sinners saved by grace. And they'll want to be a part of that. They don't want to be a part of hypocrisy. They see enough of that. They want to be a part of grace, which is what God has called us to. D.A. Carson says the worst possible heritage that we can leave to our children is high spiritual pretensions and low performance. Setting the standard high and never ever meeting that standard is going to be detrimental to our children, but it is going to be detrimental to the church. I've heard it said many times, son, I want you to do what I say, but not what I do. And hear this is a great phrase. Inconsistent lifestyles equals ineffective evangelism. Inconsistent lifestyles equals ineffective evangelism. If we want to reach the world, if we want to share God's grace with the world, then we need to be consistent in our walks. If we expect the world to know what we are about, then we've got to do something about it. We are sinners saved by grace. So there must be a humility that the world sees in us to know when we mess up, to lay that before them and say, hey, I'm sorry. But I want you guys to know this. We're not alone. We're not alone in the things that we've struggled with. And I want to take just a few moments to look through some scriptures to see exactly what God has said about this idea of hypocrisy in the text. Okay? The first one is this. We jump all the way back to the Old Testament. In Jeremiah chapter 7, God instructs his Israelites through his prophet with these things. Chapter 7, verse 9, it says, will you steal and murder, commit adultery and perjury, burn incense to Baal, and follow other gods you have not known, and then come and stand before me in this house which bears my name, and say, we are safe? See, they're playing a little game there. It reminds me of tag when you're little. You have that safety zone or that goal that if you're touching this tree or if you're touching that fence, then you can't get tagged, right? That's exactly what the Israelites were doing. They were doing whatever they wanted to do. And then they would run back to God and say, we are safe. You can't hurt us. We're safe. And if you know anything about the Old Testament, you know that the Israelites did this roller coaster ride with God throughout their entire history. They did it when they were in captivity. They did it when they were wandering in the desert. They even did it when they went into the promised land. They continued to roller coaster in their hypocrisy, back and forth, doing one thing, saying another, running back to God. But here's the key that happened in the Old Testament, and it continued to happen in the New Testament, and it happens today, and that is this: God always called them back to him. He always extended his grace to the nation of Israel. And if we are going to be like that, if we continue to be on this roller coaster, I want you to know that at times you need to get off that roller coaster and say, God, I need to come under your grace. I need to be a part of this grace, and I need to walk differently. God always will call us back. No matter how far you've gone, no matter what you have done, God calls you back under his grace. The second text is this in the New Testament. James writes a letter to the followers of Christ, a call to live out their faith on a daily basis to withstand the things that this world will throw at us. It was a unique book I love to preach out of, and John has actually preached out of this when he talked about judgment earlier in this series. But listen to some of these phrases that John says. In chapter 2, verse 18, it says, "Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by what I do." If you show me your faith without deeds, I will show you my faith by what I do. There's a connection there, right? Chapter 3, verse 9 says, "With the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, and with it we curse men. We've been made in God's likeness. Out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers, this should not be." They call this talking out of both sides of your mouth, right? Out of the same mouth come curses and praises. And that can't be for the followers of Christ. And chapter 5, verse 12 says, "Let your yes be yes and your no be no, or you will be condemned." This world is going to see when we say yes but mean no, or when we say no but actually mean yes. When our lives and our actions and our sayings are not intimately connected with the grace of God, then that's going to be a problem, and we're going to be labeled hypocrites. And not just as individuals, but as a congregation and as a kingdom worldwide, we will be labeled hypocrites if our words and our actions are not intimately connected. And so what James says is that we are to live according to God's scriptures. Let our yes be yes and our no be no. So God always calls us back, and if we can start living life by God's scriptures, then we're starting to be on our way. And then comes this heavyweight battle. I love this one. It's actually in Galatians chapter 2. I like to say this is the Tyson-Holyfield matchup. Or for me, who's not a huge boxing fan, this is the Rocky Balboa versus the Russian, okay, Ivan Drago, right? This is huge. This is the Dwight Howard versus everyone in the Orlando area, right? Okay? This is a clash of the titans, okay? There's a guy that actually wrote this book named Paul. And you guys have probably heard of Paul. He's written a lot of the New Testament, a lot of letters to young churches who are struggling with different things. And he has this heavyweight bout with a guy named Peter. Peter you may have also heard of. Peter the Rock. The guy on which Jesus was going to build his kingdom, the foundation of the church. Now, you watched his life as Jesus was here, kind of roller coaster back and forth. But then Jesus says, no, that's not going to work anymore. I need you to be the foundation of the church to come. And Peter accepts that, and he says, yes, I'm going to go, and let's make this happen. But here comes this huge juggernaut battle in the book of Galatians chapter 2. It says this: "When Peter came to Antioch, I opposed him to his face." This is Paul speaking to this church. It says, "Before certain men came from James, he used to eat with the Gentiles. But when they arrived, he began to draw back and separate himself from those Gentiles because he was afraid of those who belonged to the circumcision group. The other Jews joined him and his hypocrisy, so that by their hypocrisy, even Barnabas was led astray. When I saw that they were not acting in line with the truth of the gospel, I said to Peter in front of them all, 'You are a Jew, yet you live like a Gentile and not like a Jew. How is it then that you force Gentiles to follow Jewish customs?'" Did you hear what's happening there? Peter is claiming that he is a devoted Christ follower, and he's going and hanging out with non-Christians and being a part of that group and teaching them these ways. And then when Jewish leaders come back, he's like, oh, I'm going to go over here with these people. This is like a bad junior high cafeteria moment, right? Oh, the cool people are here, so I'm going to go sit with them. But what he's doing in his actions and his teaching is he's separating them from the grace of God. He's saying, you have to do it this way, and it becomes a religion instead of a relationship, which we're going to talk about here in just a second. But what does Paul do to Peter? He confronts him. He says face to face. He says it in front of other people. Dun, 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 right? That's kind of scary. But not only will God always call us back, and not only does he want us to live by his scriptures, but he wants to have us be challenged and call us to challenge others. When you are walking in faith with other people trying to grow closer to God, you need to be able to challenge them, and they need to be able to challenge you. And sometimes that'll be incredibly bold, like Paul was here with Peter. But how did Peter walk away from this? How did he accept that? Because that's a big part of being challenged as well. Well, in 1 Peter chapter 2, it says, right in the middle of things, when Peter's discussing how to be holy and how to follow after God, it says right in the middle of his list of things that we need to get rid of, right in the middle of malice and deceit, envy and slander, we have the word hypocrisy. Maybe this challenge, this battle, changed the course of Peter's actions. Maybe it was this moment that made him a better evangelist. Remember, inconsistent lifestyles equals ineffective evangelism. They had seen a brother in Christ already walk away because of the inconsistencies, and now Paul says this has got to stop, and I believe that it did for Peter right here. So much so that he wrote about it in his books later on in the scriptures. And so God will always call us back, and we should live according to God's scriptures, and we need to challenge and be challenged by those that are going after Christ as well. But here comes a big one for us. Matthew chapter 23. If you have your scriptures, you can open up to it. Matthew chapter 23 really hammers home this thought of hypocrisy. It actually has 14 times hypocrisy is used throughout the book of Matthew. It's only 18 times total in the New Testament, but 14 times Matthew uses it. Do you remember who Matthew was? Matthew, the tax collector, the guy that Jesus was accosted for even hanging out with because he was a sinner and he cheated people, and what he said was what they were supposed to owe, and what he actually took from them was different. And so he was living a life of hypocrisy. And when he comes to know Jesus and accepts that he is a sinner saved by grace, he speaks directly to the thing that he struggled with the most. And he shares with us this discourse of Jesus speaking to the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the leaders of the church in those days. They were the holy ones. They were the ones dressed in robes and preaching scriptures from the street corners. Here's what he says in chapter 23. Right off at the beginning, verse 3. And this is what you've heard earlier. So you must obey them and do everything that they tell you, but do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. The leaders of the church were not practicing what they preached. They were preaching religion instead of relationship with Jesus Christ. They were preaching religion instead of relationship with the Heavenly Father. And so Jesus says, I think what they're saying is good, but what they're doing is absolutely wrong. Now, I want to warn you in our text, I believe that this is the most exclamation pointed text that you could come across in Scripture, which means that Jesus believes that this was a big deal. Because like Paul does, as an example of what he saw in Jesus, he confronts them face to face. Jesus, speaking to the religious leaders of the day in chapter 23 of Matthew, says this, verse 13, "Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the kingdom of heaven in men's faces. You yourselves do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert, and when he becomes one, you make him," hear this, "twice as much a son of hell as you are." Jesus isn't playing around here, is he? He goes at the religious leaders and absolutely combats the way that their evangelism is taking place. What they are saying and doing is wrong. That they're traveling to get one person to come and follow what they do, and in leading them along this religion-based theology instead of relation-based theology, he is making them twice as much a son of hell as they are. We need to be careful with what we're doing, right? We need to do better in our lives. Verse 16, Jesus goes on. He didn't just stop there. Woe to you, blind guides! Exclamation point. You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he is bound by his oath. You blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift on it, he is bound by his oath. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Jump down to verse 23. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give 1/10 of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin. But you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. You blind guides, you strain a gnat, but you swallow a camel. Okay, so he first goes after how they are evangelizing to the world. He says, you're doing this all wrong and you are hypocritical because of it. And now he's going after how they worship. You're worshiping in the wrong way. You're focusing on the sacrifice and the process of it instead of the actual gift that is going on. And when you give gifts, when you give your offerings like we just did, you are worried about those little things, that 10%. If you can give your 10%, then you're right with God. But what he's saying is this: when you give offerings but don't take care of the people around you, that's not what I've called you to do. That's not how I've called you to worship. And so he calls them hypocrites. In both their evangelistic efforts and how they are worshiping, they are hypocritical. They are sinners. Continuing on, verse 25. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisees, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside also will be clean. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of dead men's bones and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. You see, he goes after their evangelism, he goes after their worship, and then he goes after how they are growing inside intimately in worship with God. He says, you have decorated yourselves on the outside. You look beautiful. You look religious. You look holy. But guess what? The insides are a mess. You are full of dead men's bones. You are whitewashed tombs. Beautiful on the outside, but inside you reek. Because you have not taken the time to grow yourself personally. So as a church, he went after their evangelism, he went after their worship, and he went after their personal growth. And what I want to call you people to today, and myself to today, because I stand before you, a sinner saved by grace, I am in this with you. We need to be careful how we interact in God's kingdom. We need to watch the words that we are saying. We need to watch how we are worshiping God. We need to be careful about how we are continually growing in our faith. Because if we're not careful, we could become hypocrites. And the world will be the ones that point that out to us. We need to do better. Another author, a guy named Kyle Idleman, wrote these words. These religious types were the fans that Jesus seems to have the most trouble with. Fans who will walk into a restaurant and bow their heads to pray before a meal just in case someone is watching. Fans who won't go to rated R movies at the theater, but have a number of them saved on their DVRs at home. Fans who may feed the hungry and help the needy, but then they make sure they work it into every conversation that they have in the next 2 weeks. Fans who make sure people see them put in their offering at church, but they haven't considered reaching out to their neighbor who has lost a job and can't pay the bills. Fans who are reading this and assuming that he's describing somebody else. Fans who have worn the mask for so long, they have fooled even themselves. This word in the New Testament, hypocrite, it's called hypocrites. And it's basically derived from the Greek theater. He was calling these Pharisees actors. You all are actors. You are people that speak for somebody else. And they would put on these masks in the theater. And that's how they changed characters. That's how you knew who they were. And typically in the Greek theater, which is what was going on in the New Testament times, they would be gods. Their characters were gods. And so quite literally, hypocrites were people that held up masks and spoke for the gods, but they were nothing like the gods underneath. That's what he was calling these religious leaders when he says hypocrites, hypocrites. And I believe what God is calling us to do as the church in response to this claim, in response to this finger pointing, is to take off our masks and be real with the people around us. Be open and honest. Be integrous in our conversations. Be humble in how we present ourselves. First and foremost, that we are absolutely sinners saved by the grace of Jesus Christ. If we can get that term out there, then point all the fingers that you want, right? We are sinners, but we are saved by God's grace. And so how can we live that sinner saved by grace lives? How can we be the people that God has called us to be? One of the things he says is to be holy as Christ is holy. That's what Peter says in his books. We need to be holy as Christ is holy. I want you to hear this very clearly, okay? When Jesus died on the cross for our sins and we accept him as our Savior, at that moment we are made holy, clean, wiped all of those sins out of our lives. But the issue is we keep on living. And some of those things creep on back. So yes, we are made holy at that moment, but then it becomes our job to continue to work as best we possibly can towards the holiness that was Jesus Christ and is Jesus Christ and will be Jesus Christ. And so how do us in our lives now work towards this holiness? Well, there's a passage in Colossians. Paul writes another book. To the church at Colossae, it was a church that kind of went up and down. And I want to quickly give you these 7 steps that he writes here to help us into holiness instead of hypocrisy. Verse 12 of chapter 3 says this: "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved." I love that, holy and dearly loved, because this is the time when we take off our masks. You know what Jesus was claiming of these Pharisees? What he was pointing his fingers at them and saying, and what the world is pointing their fingers at the church and saying is this: you are fake. You are not living the way that your words and your doctrine says that you should live. You have been duped, and you are now actors. And what Paul says here is that if we are called holy and we are chosen by God, then we need to take off those masks, take off that fakeness, take off that hypocrisy, and clothe ourselves, back to our text, clothe ourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievances you may have with one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you, and over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. The first thing I want you to see is this, that clothe yourselves. If we are continuing to take off our masks of hypocrisy, clothe ourselves with these virtues. It's a beautiful Greek language term in the original text because it is a continual movement. It's a continual clothing of ourselves. It's not just one day we get up and we put these virtues on and that's the day we're going to live for God. It is a continuing, ever-going, ongoing process throughout all of eternity that we would clothe ourselves with these things. The other thing I want you to know is this: it's not one and done. It's not a put one of these on and then I'm doing good. It's clothe yourselves with all of these virtues, all of these steps towards holiness. Let's just walk through them. Compassion. Compassion, understanding the hurts and circumstances of other people around us. If we can live our lives with compassion. Do you remember last week's service? He talked about how we needed to comfort those around us with the comfort that we have been given from God. That's how we can show compassion to this world, understanding their hurts, understanding their needs. Kindness is sharing and meeting the needs of those circumstances. So we don't just comfort them and say we understand, but we try to reach out and serve those that are hurting around us. Humility, and we talked about this, acknowledging that others are indeed more important than your needs and your wants. If we can put others in front of us, the term actually means to surrender to those around us. Surrender my wants, surrender my desires, and put them ahead. If we can show compassion and kindness and humility, and then gentleness in words or conversations that could be difficult to have. You know, when somebody's accusing you of something, it's a lot easier to come back accusing them, isn't it? If we can have these conversations in gentleness, understanding where they are coming from, being humble in our approach, then the world will see us in a different light. It will get rid of those holier than thou attitudes. Patience in knowing that each of us and those around us are on their own specific journey towards Christ. Some people are up there and we can be challenging them, but sometimes they're in a different place. And we have to respect that. And I have a huge patience problem. God's continued to be working on that in my life, and he will continue to work on it in my life because I just struggle with patience. Maybe some of you guys are like that. Maybe some of you are with me. Have you ever gotten angry because your phone or your computer is not loading the scores fast enough? Man, drives me bonkers, right? I've done that, okay? Well, do you ever get angry in the drive-through lane at a fast food restaurant? Man, you can see me. I'm tapping my fingers on the windowsill. I'm looking out the window. I'm trying to eye the person in the side mirror, say, get on going, right? Drives me crazy. I'm waiting, what, a total of 7 minutes maybe to get a meal prepared for me? And I'm angry because I'm waiting that long? When I know I'm going to get a delicious Happy Meal and it'll be okay. But I get angry because I'm an impatient person. This is the worst one. Worst one. You ever walked into a sliding door that didn't open fast enough? Yep, I've done that. Got the nose print on the thing. And I get mad at the door because it didn't open fast enough. I have a patience problem. God is working on that in my life. But he's continuing to mold me into this holiness that he's called me to be. And this is one of the steps. Forgiveness, knowing that we have first been forgiven by God, so that we should then be forgiving those around us, even when it's not deserved. And that becomes a very tough thing to do. And finally, love. When you have exhausted every other option, you go back to the one that you should have started with in the first place. And that is to love the people around you with an unconditional love. It kind of says that this is the overcoat. If we're clothing ourselves with all these virtues and all these steps towards holiness, love is the one that holds it all together in perfect unity. It's the one that keeps you warm inside. In 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the love chapter, right? It's said at many different weddings. Right in the midst of spiritual giftedness talk, it says, love one another. It says this, love never fails. It never fails. So if we can be a people that are pursuing the holiness of God, to be holy as Christ is holy, to be compassionate, kind, humble, gentle, patient, forgiving, and loving, then this world will see a different church. And the fingers will stop pointing our way. And that's for those of you that are in a relationship with God. For those of you that are not in a relationship with God, and you're the one that's been pointing the fingers, and you've come today to figure this out, I want to congratulate you. Is the church full of hypocrites? Yeah, you're right. You caught us. You got us. But I would beg you to change that word to sinners, because we are sinners saved by grace. If you identify some inconsistency in a believer or follower of Christ, you have never destroyed the credibility of the gospel. Did you hear that? If you find somebody who's not living up to the standards that were set, it doesn't destroy the credibility of Jesus Christ's life. Don't misconstrue the two. Jesus has never been a hypocrite. He never sinned, he never lied, he never pretended to be something that he was not, but went to the cross so that you and I could be made holy in our lives. He's the one that showed us compassion. It was his kindness, it was his humility, it was his gentleness and patience and forgiveness and love that we follow these days. He was the one that died on the cross for our sins so that we didn't have to. He was the one that rose again to give us new life. He was the one that gives us the grace so that you and I can live a grace-filled life. We are sinners saved by grace, nothing else. Please hear this. Ultimately, Christianity stands or falls on the person of Jesus and not the performance of Christians. Christianity stands and falls on the person of Jesus Christ and not the performance of Christians. If you're here today and you have never accepted Jesus Christ into your life, I want to encourage you to come and talk with somebody to see exactly what this is all about and what this entails. Maybe some of you need to come forward just to pray. There's some hypocritical issues going on in your life that you need to leave at the cross and say, I'm going to walk away from those and live a different life. Maybe you need to come forward. We're going to have people up front to pray with you, to help you with decisions that you may be making. But ultimately, hear that last line again. We rise and fall on the person of Jesus Christ. Not on me, not on you. So if we can lead people to that through our actions and our words, the church will no longer be said, you're a hypocrite. But you're a sinner saved by grace, and so am I. That's what we want. Consistent lifestyles with the Holy Spirit moving in people's lives to come and know who Jesus is. Let's pray. Father God, may your Spirit move in this place. Change us, God, in a way that we have never been changed before. Help us with those issues that we have going on in our lives currently. God, give us boldness when we will struggle in the future. God, give us that gentleness in our conversations. But God, more than anything, thank you for redeeming us and sharing with us your grace and your mercy. We love you, Father. It's in your Son's name I pray. Amen.